The issue that has faced society since the beginning of time has been a very simple question. That issue is, who decides? Who decides the terms of your life? Is it you, the individual, or is it the state? If we're to resolve that that question is answered, that the individual decides the terms of one's life, that society must come to understand that to respect the dignity of human life requires respecting the private property of another. These ideas are not new to humankind. They're as old as the Ten Commandments, with the prohibitions against stealing and coveting the property of another. But they came to societal fruition with the foundation of America and the constitutional provisions that guide and govern this country. It was in those institutions that the concept of self-governance was understood to be a necessary prerequisite to leading a life that is one's own. Today, Americans know that something is wrong. What we need to do is understand where those problems originate. But to do so, we need to start at the beginning, with an understanding of liberty itself. You see, liberty presumes that the government powers must be strictly limited in scope and that the law be applied equally to each citizen. In other words, for liberty to survive, governmental favoritism must be eliminated. Freedom means that we can each act on our own authority, limited by our legal responsibility not to infringe on the equal rights of another, and the moral and social responsibility to respect the dignity and the property of others. You see, in a free society, and only in a free society, are human beings able to develop their own conscience. Nurtured in a family environment, people can begin to become who they are, first by building a conscience, developing their personality, and building their own character. And it is when a conscience has been developed that people are free to express themselves and free to associate with whom they choose. And of course, the freedom to associate and the freedom to express require a natural freedom to trade with others without the use of force, each seeking mutual benefit that ends up giving a rise to society generally. Freedom is what promotes and is a prerequisite to peace. But genuine peace can exist only in free societies where truly voluntary and not compliant actions govern civic responsibility. You see, peace requires self-ownership, not a slave society where there may not be warfare because force is imposed. But for peace to exist, self-ownership and the right to determine the terms of one's own life requires, again, that we respect the property of others, even if such is adverse to our own interests. In other words, if someone is going to build a home in front of your home and block the view that you had to the ocean, we need to understand that if we are focused solely on the idea that we want to protect our property value, even though it comes at the expense of someone else's property right, we will all end up with neither property values nor property rights. It is respecting what others want to do with their lives and their property that gives each of us the opportunity to lead a life of our own. George Washington said that private property and freedom are inseparable. Well, he's right. But most Americans have come to forget what private property is. Most people think that private property is a thing. It's a land or a farm, maybe a car or your own home. But private property is much more than that. You see, private property begins with your hand. This is my hand. I choose its action, and I possess my hand. But private property begins with our very person. Our persons are our own private property. But it's more than that. It's our thoughts. Our thoughts are our private property. We need to be free to determine the terms of our life in order to develop those thoughts fully. And our expressions become our private property. So it's our person, our thoughts, our expression. It's our action. Private action is private property. Sometimes that action results in the creation of a thing, or we trade for something as a result of our work energy. But when that thing is taken from us by the government, whether it's our land, our houses, our television sets, or our books, it begins to affect that chain. If our property can be taken from us, we begin to act differently. This is why the Soviet Union failed. People didn't act in a societally beneficial way because it didn't benefit the individual. So when we seek acting in our own interests because our own interests are denied to us, we end up expressing ourselves differently, thinking differently, and until one day we wake up and we look at that hand that used to be ours and we find out that our hand is controlled by the power of the collective state. We are to do what we are told. The terms of our life is determined for us.